to Thinking with the Stars. I'm your host, Soul Cancer. Today I'm going to be talking about videos that were recorded by Jeffrey Mishlove on his new Thinking Aloud channel during planetary aspects involving Venus and Pluto when they were square to each other. So Pluto is a slow orbiting planet every 248 years, and it spends, I guess, between 15 and 40 years in any one sign during its transit. Right now it's in Capricorn, and it'll be in Capricorn until 2023. So the first interview I'm going to talk about, it's happened on February 28th, 2020. A gentleman by the name of Carlos Alvarado was discussing the life of Eusapia Palladino, who between around 1900, turn of the 20th century, was a well-known medium, psychic medium. And she was somebody, she had was known to be capable of producing phenomena like floating objects, tables, turning switches on and off, and would created luminous effects. So things would glow in the dark in her presence. And during this interview, Venus was in Aries, and it was square to Pluto in Capricorn. Now, Eusapia Palladino was later shown to be a fraud for all these phenomena she could produce. For instance, the floating table, she would wear a flowy black skirt, and there would be a long black curtain behind her, and she would kind of entangle her skirt in the curtain and lift the table up with using her foot. She had also seduced different people, boyfriends and part of her entourage, who would, prior to these seances, would rig up the light switches to go on and off in response to switch controlled by her accomplice. And as well, she was known to use phosphorus to paint items so that they would glow in the dark. Now, here it raises a question. I mean, she was quite famous in her day. So the question was, if being successful didn't equate to being real, what was it that would make someone successful or famous, notable? People were convinced of her powers, and it's not something that is going to, knowing she's a fraud doesn't mean that what they call, I guess, phenomena of high strangeness or psi phenomena, not that it's not real, but in this case it was fraudulent, and I guess Eusapia had her own reasons for doing it. It was a career. She made a career out of performing these seances, and people were entertained by it. And she had to gain some notoriety. I guess she was in the New York Times, and she had got to travel around and do these things. So she was described during the interview by Carlos as shrewd, and she had persuaded influential people to endorse her reputation, and she sold newspapers. She had a buoyant personality, seductive presence, and she basically was able to social engineer people to engineer society to buy into her act, and it was made for a good story. Now, another pair of interviews I'm going to be discussing were when Venus was in Pluto's in Capricorn. It's been that way since 2008, and it'll stay that way for the next couple of years. And the two square aspects you could have would be Venus in Virgo and Venus in Aries. And I guess the opposite aspect you could have, if Venus were opposite Pluto, this would be occurring when Venus is in Gemini. When Venus passes through Gemini, Venus has a short orbit of 225 days, and whereas Pluto has a long orbit of 248 years. So this aspect, talking about this aspect, really highlights the difference between, as I learned in this book by Gregory Bogart, the difference between personal planets and transpersonal planets, with Pluto being the furthest planet out. So to that end, Venus represents our values and our relationships, and I would say specifically in Libra, with its sign being the scale, so there it's representing the relationship, whereas in Aries, being the ram, Virgo's not in, Venus isn't at home in Aries, so Venus doesn't really gel in Aries too well, but Venus in Aries demonstrates how our relationships are put into action. So, whereas Pluto is taken as a planet to represent, basically Pluto represents rebirth. So it could also, Pluto in Capricorn, so it's a favorable location for Pluto, but what it represents there is, as opposed to Pluto in Aquarius, which is where Pluto's going, is an unfavorable location for Pluto, but that's okay. It represents, in Capricorn, it represents universal laws that are incontrovertible. It's just, that's the way it is. It doesn't matter who lives and who dies. The laws are not going to change. This is just the reality of the universe. This is like the universal laws. That's Pluto and Capricorn, that we're unescapable no matter what happens. So these next two interviews both occurred while Venus was in Libra square to Pluto and Capricorn. So we have this discussion about how our personal relationships, the way we choose to have things fit together, the way things fall together in our lives, how that relates to the universal laws that we don't control and that rule our lives, but they rule our lives from a great distance. And with Venus in Virgo, with Venus in Libra, maybe we're trying to engage with that. Venus is at home in Libra, I believe, or Libra is one of Venus's homes. So maybe we're trying to engage during these interview between, there was two interviews. One was with Chris Hardy, who's from France, and the other one is Jude Currivan, who is from England. And like I say, both interviews occurred during that square aspect of Venus in Libra and Pluto in Capricorn. And it's really just basically, it's an English channel dividing it 2 years later. I think this would be 3 orbits of Virgo between Chris Hardy and Jude Currivan. And yes, Jude seems quite a bit more refined, but then again, she's had those 3 extra orbits of Venus to really clarify the ideas Chris Hardy is touching on straight out the gates. So 2015, November 21st, 2015, and then October 27th, 2017. And they really are strikingly similar interviews. Chris Hardy has a French accent, and Jude Currivan has a British accent. Chris Hardy wrote a book called Cosmic DNA, and Jude Currivan wrote a book called The Cosmic Hologram. And I mean, Chris Hardy doesn't, when she's talking about cosmic DNA, it's kind of like an old school understanding of what we think DNA, like it's a blueprint, like there's a cosmic blueprint, and that all the information, this is in both articles, or both interviews, all the information, both books, well, I didn't read both books, okay, but the way I understand cosmic hologram, cosmic DNA, it's saying all the information is in a tiny little bit, and then what happens is, that's the simplicity. I don't know if I should use the word bit, because I think bit is taken on a greater meaning in this context. But in a small, simple snapshot, we can zoom out, and this is all the diversity of life comes to be from, all the diversity of life comes out of these small, simple bits. So, and that's what both books seem to be. So they are running parallel. But I'm going to talk a little bit about their story, and we're going to try to tie it back into Eusapia Palladino. Okay, although the aspect is, I mean, that's an opposite. So, talking about Chris Hardy and Jude Currivan is I'm talking about opposite thing than Eusapia Palladino, where we're wondering how can it be that a famous person doesn't have real talent, and they've been exposed, but yet people buy into it. So it's really talking about, it's exposing 2020, it's exposing society's naivete, okay? Or is it? I mean, Eusapia Palladino, her story sells papers. So are we not, if we're in the paper business, are we not exploiting Eusapia Palladino, she's relatively uneducated, she's not an attractive woman, but she does have a certain panache about her, and so it's kind of like a mutually exploitative. I mean, she's taking it, Eusapia Palladino's taking advantage of us for letting her put on a show that's not entirely real, but at the same time, we're taking advantage of her. We're using her talents, such as they are, to sell newspapers, right? So this was around 1909, 1910, I think, was her big New York, made a big splash in New York. So the name of the interviews with Chris Hardy was The Infinite Spiral Staircase. And I think there is where those Chris Hardy maybe loses out to Jude Currivan in my mind, where Jude Currivan has that 2 years head start, those 2 formative years of 2016 and 2017 for the most part, where something like Infinity, as I had kind of learned, I was reading this one here by Carlo Rovelli. Here we go. Reality is not what it seems. The journey to quantum gravity. And I was reading that one. And he was talking about infinity is basically a placeholder when we don't understand calculations, or we don't have we don't have the right proofs for our equations that we're using to understand things. Oh well, there's infinity that stands in, and I guess the new kind of understanding of the Big Bang, and both Jude Currivan and Chris Hardy speak about this. It is actually quite striking that all the similarities, and maybe I'll stop remarking on how strikingly similar they are and just start acting as though it was by design that they were such spoke about such similar topics. But I mean, I'm sure if we could kind of tunnel through from England to France, Jude and Chris would meet each other halfway. Yeah. Oh yeah, the black hole and universe was created in a black hole, and just quickly, yeah, just yeah, oh yeah, the universe was created in a black hole. Okay, yeah, cool. No, but honestly, if the universe was created in a black hole, then it would be a finite universe. Immense, enormous, giant, but finite. And that's kind of the working model that we're going with, not infinite. The same way, I remember, in college, they used to tell me, when I'd say something was ineffable, and basically what that would mean is I didn't have a grasp of the concepts, great enough grasp of the concepts to describe something. So I would just say, oh well, it's ineffable, it's beyond that which we can speak of. But on another level, it's like, yeah, no, people, I mean, there's ways to talk about this stuff, and it's just I don't have a grasp of it yet. So similar concept to infinity for mathematics. So one thing she talks about is the telepathic harmonic field, and this is great. She was talking about her travels. She's kind of lived the life of, she's traveled a lot. I don't know what you call that. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that one. A nomad, I guess you call them. But yeah, so she was visiting a monastery. It's really good, deep story, good stories. Go watch. I'll put the link to the video in the description. No, but she was the telepathic harmonic field, and this is what was striking, and it's kind of interesting. When Chris Hardy's talking about this, she's talking about, okay, 150 yards from the monastery, there was like a boundary of telepathic harmonious information, and she could sense when she had crossed the boundary. And so she's talking about, and to me, that was that's the sweet spot there, the boundary, because it contains contextual information, not just monks sitting. If we're talking about being a bodhisattva, of saying, okay, I know what enlightenment is, I can reach enlightenment, but I'm not going to take those steps and do those things until everyone can make that journey with me. So monks are sitting, and of course monks are people who've made the sacrifice of living a regular life for being the ones that, so that we don't have to, being the ones to take the spiritual journey and stay in that place of peace and enlightenment through meditation. And but Chris Hardy sensed that surrounding the monastery, they had created this telepathic field, and she could sense being now what it was like inside the field and outside the field. I'm saying the boundary is the interesting part, because the boundary is kind of containing that information of saying, okay, what differentiates a monk from somebody living in society, which I would find interesting. But of course, at certain times in our life, we're drawn to that inner core where we need to come to peace with some kind of inner struggles. So that could be interesting as well, as opposed to chaos outside the boundary that we all kind of have to deal with. to this end, it's talking about how psychic phenomena, and especially like a phenomena of high strangeness, they're typically associated with a place. So if we were going to have a seance, we'd want to go to like a haunted house and say, okay, you know, come out wherever you are, you know, oh, I'm hearing banging noises now, you know, well, that's just the washing machine, whatever it is. Whereas Eusapia Palladino, she took the show on the road, you know, and it's just we don't find that people have that capacity to demonstrate amazing powers without their comforts of a home, as it were. Now, okay. Right, so Chris Hardy moves on where she's talking about from telepathic field theory to semantic field theory. So this is great. It's how she's able to account for, right, so semantic field theory would be like a field of meaning. So it's a nice postulate, nice thing to postulate, because you can account for anything using semantic field theory. You say, well, that's what that means then. I mean, there's some unexplained phenomena. Well, it's all part of, it all ties in together. So the only thing I would hope is that it would get tightened up a little bit. And I mean, this is what we're talking about. Like in this book here. Jeez, I gotta work on that, eh? Fundamental by Tim James. How quantum and particle physics explain absolutely everything. So, yeah, there's my bookmark. So I'm talking about books when I haven't even read them all. Read the whole thing. You know, take me back. But, anyway, yeah. So, about Michael Faraday, who in 1830, he, and I mean, this is all time back in, so yeah, in 1830, let's just say, for simplicity's sake, discovered electromagnetic fields, okay? And Tim James points out that prior to 1830, you know, their photographs were just being invented around that time, right? The telegraph was just being invented around that time. So it was talking about where, you know, with Wi-Fi and all that, where we've been able to cut the cord now. This was 1830s, you know, it was the Industrial Revolution, and I suggest that, especially thinking about Pluto and its 248 years orbit, that we are in the midst, we are in the bud, we're in the beginning stages of something akin to the Industrial Revolution that would most likely, looks to me like the quantum revolution, and that there could be these discoveries like, say, you know, electromagnetism, whereas everything prior to this was physical systems, that we had to interact physically with systems in order to exchange information with them, which is something we're going to be, that's basically the hammer throw, is the information systems, okay? But information theory is basically how I wanted to wrap the video up, so I kind of just cut to the chase, I guess. But yeah, so right. And so October 27, 2017, Jude Currivan, 3 interviews, one called The Cosmic Hologram, Universal Patterns in Nature, and Consciousness and Cosmology. So, I have a couple awesome quotes here from Chris Hardy. She was talking about how the mind controlled things that were not prone to suggestion. So this is where, using the semantic field theory, where she's trying to grasp if consciousness is in fact a property of these undulating quantum fields that exist everywhere, then how can intentionality be exclusive to a physical system, a particular physical system? Like, what's going on there? And I mean, this is something that is really, as we're trying to understand, grappling with quantum mechanics and nature of consciousness, that is just, I haven't read the right books or listened to the right person talking. I mean, Stuart Hameroff is coming really close when he's saying that it's the collapse of the wave function that generates this consciousness, right? And it's the Copenhagen answer and all this stuff. It's not entirely clear, but we do know that quantum mechanics is responsible for consciousness, and that potentially this phenomenon is existing all around us, even in empty space. Jude Currivan's quote was that we need to see not with new eyes, but with new lenses. No, I said that completely wrong. We have to see not with new lenses, but with new eyes. So that's how we want to look at the Eusapia Palladino. I mean, Jeffrey Mishlov's channel is about parapsychology, and parapsychology is the study of things such as telepathy, clairvoyance, and telekinesis, where telekinesis is moving things with our minds. And his claim is that parapsychology is largely ignored by the scientific academic community, and that parapsychology has these non-insignificant, has significant proof in the literature for parapsychological phenomena, and it's ignored, and trying to bring that out into the light. And then here we have Eusapia Palladino, who's a known medium, and has people who are believing in her, and she's exposed as a fraud. And how is this is kind of not gelling with the narrative that Dr. Mishlove is putting forward, and that's okay. I mean, this is he's not afraid of these sort of counterpoints. And I mean, to be so single-minded that one on and off switch is going to break the deal, is to kind of see the world with new lenses. But we're talking about seeing the world with new eyes. And so with that, we're saying, okay, well, what is it about people that makes us kind of gobble up this story of Eusapia Palladino? What is it about what's going on? And it's because we all know that there's potential for these unexplainable phenomena, or explainable phenomena unexplainable with the apparatus that we have as of yet. And so to say that, there's going to be a big discovery here in the next 50 years that revolutionizes the way that we perceive reality, it's no great shakes, it's no big news. We know this. I mean, this is what's going to happen, and we just don't know what it is yet, right? So there's been some speculation. You can guess. I mean, it'd be the same thing, right? And it kind of, with Pluto's orbit of 248 years, there is, in talking about it and thinking about it, there is this kind of nostalgia, because my lifetime would hopefully span 180 degrees. If it was 180 degrees on average, it'd be 124 years that I'd live to see, Jude Pluto on the cusp of Libra, all the way traverse all the way to Pluto on the cusp of Aries, and that's a long life. That's in the neighborhood of 80 to 90, 90 to 100 years. I mean, to see that would be all we could hope for, and you can't help but be kind of a historian of these facts, at least for the last 250 years, and think, okay, so what am I missing on the other side then? What kind of trends am I going to see? What kind of trends am I not going to see? And so we're bringing it to a close. Information theory. So this is just trying to establish that Eusapia Palladino was recognized as lovable kind of affable character, and people loved her for that. And the seances that were exposed as fraud was kind of like a beside the point, okay? And the reason why is kind of uncovered. They were both Chris Hardy and Jude Currivan both talk about information theory. And so information theory is kind of the coup de grace of quantum mechanics, where communication is the exchange of information between two physical systems. And I'm getting this from Carlo Rossi as opposed to Chris Hardy and Jude Currivan, because they really tried. I mean, they have, I think, once you kind of grasp this concept, you grasp it. They weren't really able to express it well enough, but I mean, I think maybe reading it is, get an opportunity to go back, reread it. Okay, I didn't quite grasp that, okay. But basically the main thrust of the idea is that communication is the exchange of information between two physical systems, with the result of entropy. And entropy is kind of the negative information. So entropy is the information that doesn't get, it's like the subtext, it's like the kind of the undercurrents below the ebbing and flowing of what is apparent on the surface, like Eusapia Palladino's apparent fame and success. So that about brings it to a close. Thanks very much for watching, if at all, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and thanks again.